The cruelest punishment you can inflict on someone who took you for granted isn't anger. It isn't confrontation. It isn't even revenge. It's absence, total, complete, irreversible, no explanation, no warning, no trace. You simply cease to exist in their world. And what happens next inside their mind is something they will never admit to you, something that will haunt them in the quiet hours, something that will resurface every time they see someone who walks like you, laughs like you, disappears like you never did, until now. Machiavelli understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He knew that power isn't about what you say, it's about what you withhold. It isn't about presence, it's about strategic absence. And the one who can vanish without looking back controls the entire psychological battlefield without ever lifting a weapon. This video will dissect the 7 stages of psychological torment that unfold inside someone's mind when you simply disappear. Not when you argue, not when you beg for attention, not when you demand to be valued, when you vanish. And by the end, you'll understand why the most devastating thing you can ever do to someone who underestimated you is to become a ghost they can never stop thinking about. But here's what I won't tell you yet. The 7th stage, the final one, is something so disturbing, so rarely discussed, that most people never see it coming. It's the moment they realize something about themselves that breaks them permanently. We'll get there. But first, you need to understand the architecture of psychological collapse. 1. The shock of non-existence. When you disappear, the first thing they feel isn't sadness. It isn't regret. It's disorientation. You've disrupted the algorithm of their reality. See, people don't actually value you when you're present. They value the consistency of your presence, the reliability of your attention, the predictability of your emotional availability. You became a fixed variable in their equation, and fixed variables are never respected. They're expected. When you vanish, you don't just remove yourself. You delete a piece of their psychological infrastructure. Their brain was running on certain assumptions that you would always respond, always be reachable, always absorb their chaos without consequence, and suddenly that system crashes. Machiavelli wrote that men are so simple of mind and so much dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived. But what he also understood is that the moment deception ends, when the reliable pawn removes itself from the board, the deceiver is left staring at an empty space they never anticipated. They assumed you would always be there because you always were, and now you're not. This is not grief, not yet. This is something more primal. This is the disorientation of someone who walked into their kitchen expecting to find a refrigerator and found a void instead. They keep reaching for you out of habit. They check their phone. They open your chat. They expect you to text any moment, but you don't. And the silence begins to hum in a frequency they cannot escape. The shock doesn't announce itself with dramatics. It creeps. It settles into small moments, the empty seat, the unanswered message, the name that no longer appears. They don't understand yet what's happening. They just feel something missing, something structural, and that something is you. Let them feel it. Let the absence speak before you ever say another word. 2. The interrogation. Within, once the shock settles, the questions begin. And these questions don't come gently. They arrive at 2 a.m. when the world is quiet and the distractions have run out. They arrive mid-conversation when someone mentions your name and their stomach drops. They arrive without mercy, without structure, without answers. What happened? Did I do something? Why won't they respond? Are they okay? Are they with someone else? Did they ever really care about me? This is the stage where their mind becomes a courtroom, and they're both the prosecutor and the defendant. They replay every conversation, every slight, every moment they dismissed you, every time they chose convenience over connection. And here's the brutal truth they will never admit. They weren't prepared for you to have limits. You were supposed to be infinite, bottomless, a well of patience they could return to whenever they needed a drink. But wells dry up when no one tends to them, and now they're staring at an empty hole, wondering when it happened, how it happened, why they didn't notice. This interrogation is relentless because it has no resolution. There's no trial, no verdict, no closure. Just an endless loop of what-ifs spinning behind their eyes. Machiavelli observed that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. But what happens when a ruler wakes up and the men are gone? When the court is empty? When the throne room echoes only with the sound of his own footsteps? He begins to question whether he ever deserved the crown. This is what's happening inside them now. Not consciously, not verbally, but somewhere beneath the surface, the interrogation has begun, and it won't stop until it finds a culprit. And the culprit, they're starting to realize, might be themselves. 3. The hunger for resolution. Human beings cannot tolerate incomplete loops. This is a psychological law more powerful than almost any other. When a story starts, the mind demands an ending. When a question is asked, the brain hungers for an answer. And when someone who was central to your emotional architecture simply disappears without explanation, the mind goes into overdrive trying to close the gap. This is the third stage. Hunger. They begin reaching, not for you, not directly, but for any piece of information that might explain your silence. They scroll through your social media looking for clues. They analyze your last message looking for coded meanings. They ask mutual friends, casually, carefully, trying not to seem too interested, if they've heard from you. And here's where the power shifts, because every unanswered question is a hook in their mind. Every mystery about your absence becomes an obsession they cannot shake, and the less you give them, the deeper the hooks sink. Machiavelli understood that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. But what happens when a fool is desperate for closure and the wise man offers only silence? The fool spirals, the fool obsesses, the fool hands over power without realizing he's doing it. They need resolution, they crave it like oxygen, but you're offering none. And that absence of resolution creates a psychological pressure that builds and builds with no release valve. The hunger isn't romantic. It isn't always about wanting you back. Sometimes it's simply the brain's desperation to complete a story, to understand, to close the file and move on. But you've denied them that mercy. And in that denial, you've taken up permanent residence in their mind. Some people think giving closure is kindness. It isn't. Closure is permission to forget. When you offer no closure, you become unforgettable. Not because you're special, but because the loop never closes. You become an open wound they cannot stop touching. 4. The myth-making. When people cannot access the truth, they invent one. This is the 4th stage, and it's perhaps the most fascinating because it reveals just how fragile the human ego really is. When faced with the unexplainable absence of someone they undervalued, the mind begins constructing narratives. Not to understand you, but to protect themselves. They start telling themselves stories. Maybe they were always like this. Unstable, unpredictable. Maybe they never really cared about me as much as I thought. Maybe they're doing this for attention. Maybe they found someone else. Maybe they'll be back soon, begging for forgiveness. These myths serve a function. They rewrite history in a way that preserves self-image. Because the alternative, admitting that they drove away someone valuable through neglect, disrespect, or entitlement, is too painful to accept. And so the myth-making begins. But here's what they don't realize. Myths are unstable. They require constant maintenance. Every time reality contradicts the narrative, the myth must be reinforced, revised, restructured. And that takes energy, mental bandwidth, emotional labor. You've become a parasite in their psychology without doing anything at all. Machiavelli wrote that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands because everyone can see but few can feel. And when you remove yourself from view, when you become invisible, they can neither see nor feel the truth. They're left grasping at shadows, constructing explanations from thin air, telling stories about a ghost. The irony is sharp. The less you engage, the more they must work to maintain the illusion. Their peace becomes contingent on a fiction, and fictions eventually collapse under the weight of reality. They'll defend the myth publicly. They'll tell friends they're glad you're gone, that it was for the best, that they never needed you anyway. But late at night, when no one's watching, the myth falters, and beneath it, the truth begins to pulse. You mattered more than they admitted, and now you're gone. 5. The phantom presence. There is a phenomenon that psychologists call intrusive recall. It's when the mind involuntarily summons memories of someone despite, or perhaps because of, the conscious desire to forget them. This is the 5th stage. The stage where you become everywhere and nowhere. They see you in strangers, in songs, in the corner of their eye. They hear your voice in quiet rooms. They feel your absence in crowded ones. You've become a phantom, haunting not their physical space, but their mental landscape. And the cruelest part, this stage often arrives after they thought they were over you. They went through the shock. They survived the interrogation. They fed on the hunger and built their myths. And then just when they thought they'd moved on, your ghost returns. It comes without warning, a smell, a phrase, a place you once went together. And suddenly the myth cracks and the reality floods back. You were real, you were there, and now you're not. Machiavelli spoke often of the importance of timing, of knowing when to strike and when to withdraw. But what he understood implicitly was that withdrawal creates a vacuum, and vacuums demand to be filled. When you leave, something must take your place. But what if nothing can? What if they try to fill the space with distractions, relationships, substances, noise, and still feel the hollow echo of your absence? That echo becomes your voice. The phantom presence is particularly devastating because it's uncontrollable. They cannot choose when you appear in their thoughts. They cannot schedule your intrusion. You arrive when you arrive, and they are powerless to stop it. This is the moment when they realize that forgetting you isn't a choice. It's a battle. And it's a battle they're losing. You're not there, but you're everywhere. And that contradiction will split their peace in half. 6. The revaluation crisis. Every person operates on an internal economy, an unconscious ledger that tracks value, who matters, who doesn't, who deserves attention, who can be ignored. When you were present, you were cheap currency, abundant, easily accessible, always there. But now that you're gone, the market corrects. This is the 6th stage, the stage where they finally see what they had, not through appreciation, but through loss. The value they assigned you was wrong. The ledger was flawed, and now, in your absence, they're forced to reassess everything. This is painful because it requires something the ego resists at all costs: admission of error. They didn't just lose you. They underpriced you. They took you for granted not because you lacked value, but because they lacked the vision to see it. And that realization doesn't arrive gently. It arrives like a blade through fog, cutting through the myths they built, exposing the truth beneath. You were worth more, and they spent you like you were worthless. Machiavelli observed that people often do not recognize their own mistakes until it is too late to correct them. And by the time the revaluation happens, the market has closed. You've been withdrawn. Your stock is no longer available. They can see your value now, clearly, painfully, undeniably, but they cannot buy back in. This is the stage where regret begins to calcify into something heavier, where the occasional sting becomes a chronic ache, because it's one thing to lose someone valuable. It's another thing to realize you threw them away, and they did. Not with malice, not with intention, but with neglect, which is sometimes worse, because neglect is slow, neglect is invisible, neglect kills without blood. Now they understand, but understanding changes nothing, because you're already gone. 7. The mirror that doesn't lie. This is the stage I told you we'd reach. The one they don't see coming. The one that changes them permanently. After the shock, after the interrogation, after the hunger and the myths and the phantom and the revaluation, after all of it, there comes a moment of stillness. A moment where the noise stops and they're left alone with the only thing they cannot escape, themselves. This is the stage where they stop asking what happened to you and start asking what's wrong with them. Why do I keep losing people? Why do people leave me? What is it about me that makes people vanish? This is the stage where your absence becomes a mirror. And the reflection isn't kind. Machiavelli wrote that a man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him among so much that is evil. But the inverse is also true. A man who ignores virtue long enough will eventually find himself alone, surrounded by the wreckage of relationships he thought he controlled. Your disappearance forces them to confront a truth they've been avoiding perhaps their entire lives. That they are the common denominator in their own losses, that their behavior, their patterns, their entitlement has created a world where people eventually leave. And you are simply the latest, or maybe you were the one who mattered most. This mirror stage is not transformation, not necessarily. Many people look at the mirror and look away. They retreat back into myth. They find new targets for their neglect. They repeat the cycle because change requires courage and courage requires suffering. But some stare into the mirror longer than comfort allows. And in that stare, they begin to crack. Not into pieces, but into openings. Openings through which perhaps a new self might emerge. You won't be there to witness it. You've already moved on. But somewhere, in some quiet corner of their mind, your absence will remain etched like a scar, proof that they once had something valuable and let it slip through their fingers because they were too blind to hold it close. There is a particular kind of power that requires no words, no confrontation, no dramatic exit speech, no final message burning with anger or dripping with pain. It's the power of absence, pure, uncontaminated, irreversible. When you disappear without explanation, you leave behind something far more powerful than words. You leave behind questions that will never be answered. You leave behind a void that cannot be filled. You leave behind a version of yourself that exists entirely in their imagination, unblemished by argument, untainted by begging. You become legend. And legends, by their nature, do not explain themselves. Machiavelli's entire philosophy rests on a single axis. The one who controls perception controls reality. And by vanishing, you've done something remarkable. You've relinquished all control over perception while simultaneously seizing total control over their internal reality. They will create you in their absence. They will inflate you. They will see you everywhere. They will wonder for years what could have been, what went wrong, what they missed. And you will be free. Free from the exhausting labor of proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. Free from explaining your needs to those who dismiss them. Free from waiting for change that was never coming. Your silence becomes a sentence they must serve alone. Perhaps you're watching this because someone in your life has pushed you to the edge. Someone who sees you every day but hasn't truly looked at you in months. Someone who responds with half attention, who shows up when convenient, who treats your presence like furniture. Useful, yes, but unremarkable. You've wondered if it's worth it, if you should say something, if you should fight for recognition. But consider this. The fight is a trap. Confrontation, in many cases, gives them exactly what they want. A chance to dismiss your concerns, to explain away their neglect, to convince you to stay through hollow promises. But disappearance? Disappearance offers no such opportunity. It's final, it's clean, it's a complete removal of your emotional labor from their ecosystem, and the hole you leave behind will speak louder than any argument you could ever construct. Machiavelli did not teach aggression, he taught strategy, and strategy sometimes means knowing when to leave the board entirely. But this isn't just about them, it's about you. When you disappear from someone who undervalued you, something shifts inside you. A door closes that needed closing, a chapter ends that had dragged on too long, and in that ending you find something unexpected. Power. Not power over them, though that exists, but power over yourself, power over your decisions, your energy, your attention. You reclaim ownership of your own emotional economy. You stop investing in dead stock. The first few days might sting. The silence might feel foreign, even wrong. You might second-guess yourself, wonder if you were too harsh, if they'll change, if you should reach out. Don't. Let the silence do its work. Let the void expand. Let them feel the full weight of what they took for granted. And meanwhile, you rebuild. You invest in yourself. You discover who you are without the constant drain of someone who never saw you clearly. This is not cruelty. This is correction. You are not punishing them. You are protecting yourself. And sometimes the same action serves both purposes. They will never admit what your absence did to them. Their pride won't allow it. Their narrative requires them to move on, to pretend they're fine, to tell mutual friends they don't care. But you'll know. You'll know because you understand the 7 stages now. You understand what happens when someone who was always there suddenly isn't. You understand the architecture of psychological collapse that follows. And you'll know because eventually, in some form or another, they'll reach out. Maybe weeks later, maybe months, maybe years. A message, a call, a comment, an indirect signal that they've been thinking about you. When that happens, you'll have a choice. Let them back in and risk repeating the cycle, or remain silent and let the legend endure. I cannot tell you which to choose. Only you know what you need, what you deserve, what you're willing to accept. But I can tell you this. The person who can walk away and stay away holds all the power. Not because they're cold, not because they don't feel, but because they've learned the hardest lesson anyone can learn. You cannot force someone to value you, but you can remove yourself from those who don't. And in that removal, you discover something they never will, your own worth. If this revealed something you needed to hear, understand, this is only what I can share publicly. There are layers I cannot show here. Dimensions of this psychological architecture that go deeper than any platform would allow. The algorithm punishes what it cannot control. Those dimensions exist behind the join button. If you're still here, you're not like the others. Most left when the video got uncomfortable. You stayed, you listened, you understood. Subscribe if you haven't. But if you want access to what's hidden, the knowledge that isn't safe for the general feed, click join and step into a different level. You'll unlock what remains unspoken. The videos that go where this one cannot. Most won't. That's the point.